All rise. The Lawyer of the Apes is now in session. How's it going, everybody? I hope everyone had a great Columbus Day weekend. I'm sure you've heard these commercials on TV before. You may be entitled to compensation. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. These types of commercials that you see, you may be seeing not too long down the future for the short squeeze litigation. Once things start getting going with the short squeeze litigation and they survive the motion to dismiss, many lawyers are going to be seeking out, plaintiffs to add into this lawsuit. This happens all the time, whether it's a defective drug or a defective medical device, like a hip replacement or something like that. Once the ball gets rolling on these cases, plaintiffs' lawyers will be out in full force trying to get clients to join the multi-district litigation, which is short MDL, multi-district litigation, or joining a class action lawsuit. But what's the difference between the two? What is the difference between an MDL, multi-district litigation, and a class action? Believe it or not, they're two very different types of legal strategy, and I'm going to go over both of them today for you guys, so you can make an informed decision if you were part of the, if you're a victim of the short squeeze litigation, if you were an individual that lost money or believes they lost money as a result of the buy button being taken away from you. And if that's true, then you might want to consider hiring an attorney to represent you in an MDL or the class action. But you really want to understand the difference between the two, because one will make you significantly more money potentially than the other. So what is the difference? Basically, a class action lawsuit, right, is one action filed against a big corporation or a conglomerate. You see it all the time. There was one recently, not too long ago, against a ticketing company like Ticketmaster. I think it was called Live Nation. And in that case, Live Nation had done something wrong, so there was an action filed against Live Nation. A class action certification was achieved. That's something that is done via the court. The attorneys have to make a special argument that says that there's a specific class of people that were injured. The injury is similar, and because of that, they are entitled to some type of compensation. Now, a class action means that whatever the decision is in that case, win or lose, it affects the entire class of people. It does not, each person does not get their day in court. Each person is not looked at individually. Basically, class actions work where, a small group of people, a small group of the class, like 3 or 4 or 5 members of the class, they are part of the action. And then after they determine whether or not they're going to go forward with the case or not, then they'll seek out additional people later after the fact. So basically, the way it would work is the class action would be filed, the attorneys would all gather, discuss the case, and if it was going to go forward, if they won the case, the class is certified as being victorious, and then basically a card would go out saying, if you were a member that fits into this category, then you're entitled to the relief that was granted, and whatever that relief is. And most of the time, there's so many people in the class that the settlement numbers are very small, and you have no way of getting it any other way. There's no other way for you to really get compensated. You have no choice. You have to opt in and basically get whatever the settlement terms are, or whatever the verdict was in the favor of the class. You're just lumped in with everybody else. You don't get your own individual day in court. But an MDL is different. An MDL is multi-district litigation. That means there are a number of cases that are going to all be put together, and they're all going to be heard before one judge. So in this case, all the litigation is going to be heard, all the pretrial litigation is going to be heard in Florida. So that means, the motion to dismiss, all the complaints, the discovery process, all of the larger aspects of the litigation, the most time consuming, the most expensive aspects of the litigation are all going to be heard and decided and handled by one group of people called the Plaintiff Steering Committee. all those are the lead plaintiffs' lawyers on the case, and they're the ones that will help gather all of this information and all of this evidence and have it, before this judge. Now, once that is all established, then each individual case still can be heard on its own. Each person that is part of the multi-district litigation can have their own individual trial. But usually that's all avoided, because what happens is they take usually the 5 best plaintiff cases, the 5 best defense cases, they put them to trial, and then based upon the results of those cases, they call them bellwether cases, they make a determination as to whether or not they want to proceed and go forward. But 90% of the time, they wind up, agreeing to settle the cases. Now, remember, if this was a class action and there was an agreement to settle the cases, you would just be lumped into the class. But as in being part of an MDL, you don't have to accept the settlement. If you don't think you're making enough money off of the settlement terms, then you can reject the settlement and you can go forward on trial represented by your own lawyer. But that's very expensive. So it depends on who's representing you. Most of the time, if you're part of an MDL, you are put into a group where they give certain categories of injury. So basically, let's say, for example, in the context of a defective drug, if there would be groups of categories of people and that based on injury. So let's say someone took a medication and it led to them to be, sick for a very short period of time. That person that group of people would be assigned X dollars. Let's say somebody suffered a significant injury, but they lived. Then they would get another they would fall into another category. A third category, let's say there was a group of individuals that were being represented by their loved ones or the estate of someone who passed away. That person would receive a different set of compensation. But again, if they were unhappy with the numbers that were part of that settlement in the MDL group, they can always say no, and they can go forward and try to have, the case brought up to trial. In a class action, an individual would not have that option. So it's important. So if you start seeing advertisements on television for lawyers, looking for individuals that were injured, quote unquote injured, or lost money, suffered damages due to the short squeeze litigation. And the theme of that is the time in January when Citadel, Robinhood, and all of these other individuals allegedly conspired to take away the buy button. If you suffered what you believe to be a financial loss because of that, they'll be advertising for that. And you want to make sure in the back of your mind and think to yourself, which one do I really want to be a part of? Do I want to be a part of the class action, or do I want to be a part of an MDL? It depends. So you want to make sure that, because I know there's a couple of different lawsuits that have been filed in regards to this short squeeze. So you have to watch out and make sure that you're going to be part of the one that's going to really maximize the best settlement for yourself. So you really want to pay attention. And if you do speak to an attorney, when the time comes, make sure that they answer all of your questions about whether or not they're filing this as part of the MDL, or if they're doing this as part of the class action, or if they can make you part of both. But just make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into and what the possibilities are in terms of your monetary compensation. You don't want the lawyers to make you don't want them to tell you something that is going to basically be the easier route for them, but not necessarily lead to a greater potential settlement for you. So you really want to make sure that whoever you interview and speak to, that you make sure that they are being straightforward with you and they're letting you know that you're being part of something that will yield you the best type of financial settlement. So that's basically the video for today. I really just wanted to touch briefly on the difference between those two types of actions, because I think over the next couple of months and year, if this motion to dismiss survives, you're going to start seeing a lot more advertisements on television looking for plaintiffs to be represented by lawyers. So just keep that in mind. And until next time, everybody, the Lawyer of the Apes is adjourned.